Okay, so today's presentation is especially meaningful for me. I have the privilege of introducing to you someone who has been a very dear friend for almost 20 years now. Many of us are fortunate enough to have people in our lives that leave us just a little bit better than when they found us. And Ken is one of those people to me. Knowing Ken has changed the way that I look at life. He has an incredible ability to put life's challenges into perspective, focus on what truly matters, and face each day with gratitude. Those qualities are absolutely contagious. And I know my life is richer because I've had the privilege of calling Ken my friend. One of the things I admire most about Ken is that no matter what life puts in front of him, and he's had a lot, he's never lost his wicked sense of humor. He also has a remarkable gift for connecting with people, which I think you'll find out today. And this isn't his first rodeo. Ken has shared his story with audiences of up to 1,000 people. He's not shy. He has got a lot of energy, and he loves doing this. He loves sharing his story, and I'm just super thankful that he is here today to share his story with all of us. I've often told Ken that he's meant to tell his story, and he does, so I'm super happy about that. And it's not simply because of what happened to him, but it's because of the hope and the perspective and the encouragement it gives to everyone who hears his story. So today you are going to hear a remarkable story, and it's not just about the challenges that Ken has faced. It's about the choices he's made along the way. His journey is one of perseverance, courage, faith, determination, and ultimately finding purpose even in life's most difficult moments. I'm not going to spoil the story by giving away any details. Instead, I hope you'll experience it the way that I did, with admiration, inspiration, and more than a few laughs along the way. I'm also happy to say that Ken and his wife Chandra are now residents at Sun City Anthem and members of our Health and Wellness Club, so welcome. And I'm truly honored that you accepted my invitation to share this journey with all of us today. So with that, please join me in welcoming Ken Price.
Wow, I don't know how I can live up to that introduction, but I'm gonna try. As Lindy said, we've been friends for a long time, and she's too kind. She has bettered my life as well. Oh, is that better? A little closer. You keep it short. So there might be a little bit of a spoiler alert, being there's a set of lungs up on the slide, and I'll just let you know. But as I said, Lindy spoiled it a little bit. My wife and I are residents of Sun City Anthem. We're members of the Health and Wellness Club. You might also see me working out up at Anthem Center or on the pickleball courts or just out walking. And we love it here, by the way.
Where's he going to point that?
There.
You don't have to point it.
So, by all accounts, I was a pretty normal, all-American little boy, I think most people would say. And I always wanted to be a pilot. From the time I was small, I had just a fascination for aviation. And you know, little boys, little girls want to be pilots, or they want to be professional athletes, or, you know, every little kid has dreams of what they want to be. And I was the same way. And a quick story about this picture is, I'm 11 years old in this picture, and I knew every airplane. I could look up in the sky and tell you exactly what kind of airplane it was. And no matter what I was doing, if an airplane went overhead, I shouldn't say was going, I still do this. I can be in the middle of something, I will look up. I can't not look at an airplane going overhead. So I always wanted to be a pilot. This picture, I happened to be at Tampa Airport where I grew up, and this was back in the day with no security, you know, you could just walk out to the gate, and I loved airplanes, so I won't dwell a lot of time on this story, but my mom didn't have a lot of money for babysitters. I was 11 years old in 1974, and she didn't have time for babysitters, and she was trying to build a small business. So she was busy. So what she would do in the summer times is drive me to Tampa Airport, knowing it's kind of self-contained, drop me off with $5, and tell me when to meet her back at, I'll never forget it, Delta Baggage Claim. And because she couldn't afford a babysitter. And so I spent the days at the airport running around. Today that would probably get her in trouble, no doubt. But it worked out for me because here I am, you know, the people at the airport saw this poor little kid, probably thought I was abandoned, and I guess I sort of was, but not really. And they started giving me free food. So here I am, I get to spend all day around airplanes and pocket $5 a day. And my mom never knew I was pocketing her lunch money. She thought I was spending it. They felt bad for me. The people at the airport were giving me free food. There we go. Another big focus in my life when I was young, I came from a really athletic family. And I loved anything with a ball, anything with a racket. I just, you know, another thing that's kind of typical of your all-American little boy in the 70s. And obviously I played football here, being that I was rather small, well, I'm still super thin, but I was thin and short when I was young. The football career didn't last very long. So I ended up gravitating more toward tennis and soccer, which were built a little bit more for my physique and my skinniness. So my parents, and it was just kind of came naturally. As my dad was drafted to play pro basketball, my brother was an Olympic swimmer, and my mom was just a great athlete. So of course, like many little boys, I'm thinking maybe pro athlete, those were my hopes. You know, before that, maybe get to play in college. And so that was a big part of my life.
Get a new clicker. Here, I'll click it over here. Just tell me when to click.
Thank you. Sorry, Lindy. Her battery might be getting low. And you know, you move on from that and you grow up, and kind of think most people as they're developing, they move from one dream to the other. And these are kind of pretty typical dreams people have, might have going through life. College degree, maybe not, meaningful career, marriage, travel. And if you're fortunate to live a good long life, retirement and growing old, you know, playing pickleball, Sun City Anthem. And, but as it turns out for me, from the very start, none of these dreams were destined to happen. And that is because I was born and initially grew up in a small town in central Pennsylvania. And my life started that I was born in June of '63, and it was pretty apparent pretty quickly something was wrong. I wasn't growing, I wasn't gaining weight, my body wasn't really working like a baby's body should, and back then they just called it failure to thrive. And they could not track down what was going on. So, you know, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, they ended up sending us to experts in Philadelphia. They could not figure out what was going on. And then my pediatrician, this was back in the day when doctors actually had time to really spend on their patients. And my pediatrician dug into it And she said, you know, as a last-ditch effort, there's one thing I want to test Ken for, and that is cystic fibrosis. So back then, now they can do a genetic test. They do a blood test and they do a genetic test. Back then, the only way they could get a positive diagnosis for cystic fibrosis is they would put gauze on your arm and they would put a metal disc on it that was hooked to some electrodes. And that metal disc would get really, really hot and it would make you sweat. And so they would keep that on your arm for a while and then they would test the salt content in the gauze. Because people with cystic fibrosis sweat an excessive amount of salt. And to this day, I still technically have CF. And so to this day, if I'm out playing pickleball or doing something out in the sun and sweating, when I go in and dry off, I'm just coated with white. Anyway, as a last-ditch effort to figure out what was wrong, it turned out that I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. Back then, 1964, I was 1 year old when I was diagnosed. It was pretty, it was not very well known at the time. My parents had never heard of it. And the pediatrician had to sit them down and explain that they don't know how to treat it, they don't know how to cure it, they know very little about the disease, but all they know is that the longest, they told my parents, the longest they were gonna have me would be about 10 years. So I would be gone by 10 years. They said, that's gonna be my outside. So, there was no way to treat it, but for those of you who don't know what cystic fibrosis is, it's not a germ that you catch, it's an inherited genetic disease. It has to come from both parents. Now, no one in my family ever had it, which means both my parents were carriers, and carriers are symptomless. So no one had any clue this genetic disease was in our family. So my mom was a carrier, my dad was a carrier, got together, and here I am. I was the canary in the coal mine to tell the family that these are in our genetics. So they tell parents, you know, it impacts your lungs don't act right. Without going into too much detail, you don't have the normal system of expelling germs from your lungs. You know, you produce very, very sticky mucus. And so bacteria gets caught, you go on antibiotics. You get infected again almost right away, you go on antibiotics. Eventually antibiotics don't work anymore, you become resistant to them. And you start developing really dangerous bugs called Pseudomonas, which they couldn't treat. And that's what was killing children. Universally, 100% of the time with CF. It's just your lungs was respiratory failure. So they're like, don't send them to school, don't put them in crowds, movie theaters, keep them away from germs. You know, pretty much turned me into a homebound bubble boy, for lack of another term. And I had bad parents. They didn't listen to any of that advice, and I am grateful. They said, and I've talked to them since I've grown up, and they consciously decided that if my life was gonna be short, it was gonna be wonderful. So they sent me they went against all the advice. They sent me to school, I rode on the school bus, I went on field trips, I, you know, played on sports teams, and that was my life. And they were honest with me. Another decision they had to make was, do we not tell him and all of a sudden have to have a really difficult discussion that, hey, you're not gonna live very long? They decided it would be easier if I knew from the time I was a baby that I just grew up and it was just part of my being. It was normalcy to me. They never had to hit me with bad news. And I'm actually kind of glad they did that, because from the very start, I learned I need to live every day to the fullest. I knew I wasn't going to live very long. And so, and I think naturally from my family, I absorbed you're never a victim. You push, you try, you never gave up. That was just the unspoken kind of tone of our family, as you'd expect from a family of athletes. So, long story short, I actually did okay. I had a unique case of cystic fibrosis. My lungs really did not go bad as early as they usually do. So I grew up a state tennis player in the state of Florida, played soccer in my high school, ended up going to Cornell and playing soccer and tennis. And how I ended up at Cornell, my goal, back to my first slide, is I wanted to be a fighter pilot for the military. That was my goal. Well, you know, I got a little older, got a little more educated, and someone with CF is not going to fly fighters for the military because you are not passing any kind of physical. So I thought, as I got into high school, I was enjoying soccer and tennis, and I was doing well academically, and I thought, well, if I can't be a fighter pilot, and I love airplanes, what can I do? So I thought, my mom didn't want me going to college because my health was clear, it was starting to get worse, and you know moms. Mom just wanted me at home with her if I didn't have a lot of time left. And I'm like, I can't do that because, you know, if I can't fly these fighters, I'm gonna design them. So I researched what's the best school that I'd wanna go to for designing aviation, designing airplanes. And that's how I chose Cornell, and was fortunate enough to get in. And my mom was a little sad because, you know, it was sort of becoming apparent that maybe CF was starting to take its course. But I was thinking about it, and a lot of people have since asked me, if you knew you weren't gonna live long, why are you gonna put that much work and that much dedication and time to choose a major like that at a hard school? And even back then, my conscious decision was based around, you have to bet on winning, right? You're either gonna win or you're gonna lose. You have to bet on winning because suppose they came up with a miracle cure for what I had. And I wasn't prepared for life, I lost, right? I had no future, you know. If they didn't come up with a cure or some kind of treatment, and my life truly was gonna be short, well, I lose anyway. That's an automatic loss right there. But what if I won and there was a miracle cure, but I didn't bet on winning, and I'm ill prepared to go out into the world. So I went up to Cornell, and is anyone here familiar with the Cornell campus? Okay, it is a hilly campus. It is freezing cold. You have to walk miles to class, and here I am with lungs that are not working very well. But I wanted to hide it. I never wanted to be treated differently. My best friends didn't know I had CF. You know, I just explained away the cough, because everyone with CF has a horrible cough. So I explained away the cough and pushed myself through 4 years at Cornell, getting sicker and sicker. And I think I was in early senior year, and I think my mom was excited. It's like, okay, he'll finally come home, you know. And I can't blame her. She was my mom. She wanted me home. And what happened? I did a little research and got an offer to go to grad school at Stanford. And this is where my parents differ. My dad is like, you don't turn that down. You don't turn that down. And on the same philosophy, it was I had to bet on winning, right? I had to bet that some miracle cure was going to allow me to live past 23. So I went out to the West Coast, out to Stanford, and got a job at Douglas Aircraft in Long Beach, and I'll speed this part up. The air in LA was so bad, my old lungs started to go downhill. I mean, in that 1 year, my lungs crashed. And I'm like, I can't live here anymore. Where do they have clean air and have jobs for aerospace engineers? Seattle, right? Boeing. So I went up to Boeing, air is clear, best aerospace company on the planet, and went up there and had the good fortune to go to the CF, Cystic Fibrosis Center. But by now I was already working. I was in my early 20s, had a career going, but nobody lived into their 20s with CF, so I got I call it the old guy waiver to go to Children's Hospital in Seattle, because they had the CF clinic. So I would be in the cystic fibrosis clinic. I'd be sitting there with all these little kids, and I'm the grown adult there. I came from work, so I'm in my tie, and they're probably looking at me like I'm in the wrong clinic. And on like my second or third visit, they were starting to see people with CF getting a little older, so I was introduced to the head of the brand new, just founded adult cystic fibrosis clinic at the University of Washington, which was just right across the road. And it was a female doctor, and her and I hit it off. She loved my drive and determination. And so I was the first patient at University of Washington cystic fibrosis clinic, but I was getting sicker, and I was getting sicker. And it was so fortuitous, I ran into this one doctor, very spunky Scottish doctor. And she said it got to the point that my lung function was 15% of predicted of what it should have been. I had to wear oxygen. You know, I was sick all the time. I felt miserable. Cystic fibrosis, it is a miserable disease. You never feel good. And so she thought I needed a transplant because they thought I had about 6 months left at this one point. So I got admitted to the hospital. They worked up my whole file to send out to the only places in the country in 1992 who were doing double lung transplants. Well, there wasn't a lot of them because they're really advanced transplants. And I got the call Christmas Eve. Talk about bad timing. This doctor called me Christmas Eve, and you know, I'm excited, like, okay. And my mom had to move in to take care of me, even because I was an adult, because I was that sick. And I'm like, okay, what city are we moving to? Where am I going to get my new lungs? Are we moving to Palo Alto so Stanford can give me my lungs? Or are we moving to North Carolina so Duke can give me my lungs? Well, I got a call Christmas Eve that they felt I was too risky, and every center turned me down. So she pretty much said, get your affairs in order. She was a spunky doctor, but a very blunt one. She's like, I am really sorry, we gave it our best try. So what a miserable Christmas that was, as you can imagine. So I was starting to cope with that and thinking about getting my affairs in order. And when you're in your 20s, you don't have a lot of affairs, but, you know, get them in order. And on January 13th, she called me and she said, well, I didn't want to let you in on this, but I have been lobbying for you behind the scenes. We do not have a lung transplant here, but we're starting one up. And I think I might have convinced the head surgeon and head of the transplant team to start our transplant program up for you. If you're willing to be patient one, listed. And I'm like, I don't have another choice, you know? Signing up to be the first double lung transplant at a place that's never done them sounds like an endeavor you might think twice about, but if you don't have another option, you don't think twice about it. You think once about it. And the answer is yes. But she said, how I sold them, she goes, your medical file's a mess. To use a joke that Lindy and Christopher and I often say is, Lindy came up with an expression of, Ken, you've got issues. So basically what they said is, you've got issues. We don't like your medical file. But I told them that your personality, your compliance, your connection between your mind and your body, your job is to go sell the surgeon. She goes, I've arranged a meeting with the head surgeon, who was highly recruited from a very good institution, so he was world renowned. And she said, I've set up a meeting with him and you need to convince him to say yes, because he's really the one who decides. So she said to me, you know, good luck, be at this office at this time, and you're literally interviewing for your life. So let him know you will make this work. So I went there as this young 20-something, and we're talking. He was really quiet. He was kind of sizing me up. He wasn't asking much. Why do you want this transplant? Well, that's an easy one, you know. And not just I want to live, but, you know, I think what impressed him is it's like, I listed why I wanted to live. I want to fly airplanes, and I want to be an athlete, and I want to, get married, and I wanted this and this and this. And I looked at him and I said, if you give me my lungs, if you're willing to list me, I had to look him right in the eye and say, I will make this work. I will make this work. And he was quiet, and he looked at me, and I said, back then I didn't know to just let the silence linger. I had to break it. So I said, so do you think they'll list me for my transplant? And he looked at me, he goes, it's exactly what he said, well, I'm the big cheese here, and we'll list you for your transplant. So finally, it's like, it went from hope when my file was sent out to other places to absolute despair on Christmas Eve when I thought no one will take me. And he said, no one else would take you because you were too high risk. He goes, if you work like I know you will, he goes, I'm rubbing all of their faces in it at conferences. If you work. And they are. The University of Washington is always bringing me up still to all of the centers that turned me down. So I got put on the transplant list in January. They thought I had about 6 months to live. Yeah. And 6 months later, it's an average day, you wear a beeper. They didn't have cell phones back then. So I wore a beeper. And what they told me, when they listed you, you came into your appointment, they gave you a beeper, and they said, we don't use this beeper for anything else until your lungs come in. So if it goes off, pay attention to it. So I waited, and you wake up, you never know which day is going to be the day, right? You're going through it, and because lungs don't last very long at all out of the human body, they don't schedule these in advance. So the day you have your transplant, you wake up that day not knowing you're going to have it. So July 7th, 1993 rolls around. I've been on the list for about 6 months, and it's no coincidence, today is July 8th. So July 7th, 1993 rolls around, and I got the call. And anybody who's had a transplant or is in the transplant world, the term, the call, means one thing. And it's, when did you get the call? And tell me your story about the call, because the patient always remembers, what was the weather like? What did the person from the hospital say? You remember the call story. And I got the call. So, it's fireworks. Not only did I almost not get listed, and they had to start up the transplant program special for me, but then I had to wait and hope my lungs came in before I was gone. And I was getting extremely sick. I had a giant 8-foot oxygen tank next to my bed and a 150-foot hose so I could walk anywhere in my house. And it was on high flow all the time. So I'm like, I'm gonna get my lungs, which means it might work. Lung transplants can obviously fail, but I wasn't even thinking about that. I'm like, this is my chance. But then, after the excitement, it hits you, they're taking my lungs out tonight. And I mean, when you wake up and it's a normal day, and you're driving to the hospital, think about that. If someone told you, you woke up this morning, it's a normal day, and all of a sudden, come tonight, they're going to be taking your lungs out and giving you somebody else's. And I was the first one listed, but there were people listed after me whose lungs came in first because of the match, right? So 4 people who were listed after me actually got their lungs before me, and I knew that. All 4 of them died, right away. Right away, because it was a new program, a new center. So I remember my mom was driving me to the University of Washington Medical Center in Seattle, and I'm half excited, but not only half scared at the realization, if I wake up tomorrow morning, it's gonna be with somebody everybody else's lungs. And they've done this 4 times before, and they're batting 0 for 4. And I'm like, I like to control things because I'm an engineer, right? My degrees were in engineering, so I like to figure things out and control things. It got so overwhelming. I remember we were driving across the bridge in Seattle. I just hit a point I had to give up. Like, what they tell me to do, I'm gonna do, and I had to put this whole situation just in larger hands. God or surgeons or nurses, whoever's, but I just couldn't cope with it anymore. And I actually relaxed a lot and thought, I'm gonna go to the hospital, and whatever they tell me to do, I'm gonna do, and I'm just going with the flow till surgery. Yeah. Well, I had a really rough first 48 hours. My surgery, first of all, was 13 hours long. So I was wheeled in on the evening of the 7th, and I woke up at noon on the 8th. So I pretty much was just coming to 33 years ago, almost this hour, from my transplant. So it's a pure coincidence. This happens to be on my transplant 33rd anniversary. And after the difficult first 48 hours, they had to open me up again because I had a ton of internal bleeding, so right back down to surgery. They couldn't control my blood pressure, it was too low, and I had, not to get detailed, but drainage tubes in the chest, and they were hanging blood as fast as they could hang blood, and it was draining. So they were really worried about losing me then too, so they took me down, reoperated on me, and that patched up, I guess, all the leaks and all the holes. And I woke up on July 9th then, and my recovery was just phenomenal from then on. I was so eager to get back in action that I hit tennis, light tennis, not competitive, but I went out with my mom, who was a great tennis player, and I hit light tennis to the 4 weeks to the day of my surgeries. And that was just because I was so eager to get back to living and doing what I wanted to do. And so, not many lung transplants running around, and I didn't seek attention, but when this is a bike ride, a 200-mile bike ride in Seattle, and only elite riders do this ride in 1 day. And I guess the University of Washington put this out to make them look good, but that I did within a year of my transplant in a 200-mile 1-day bike race. So I got these great lungs. My donor was 16 years old, super healthy. And I really had a remarkable recovery, and I could get on with my life. I woke up with a sense of energy and optimism every day that all these dreams that had sailed that I knew I could never have a chance of doing, I might be able to pursue now. Yeah. And so pilot, right? The big dream, one of the first things that I endeavored to do was get a pilot's license. So for those of you who are not pilots, I'll explain that when you solo for the first time, your instructor meets you at the airport, and that your instructor goes up with you to make sure you're comfortable and you're ready to be alone in an airplane for the first time. Then you land and let your instructor out, and you go do the solo, and there's prescribed things you have to do in the solo, touch and goes and approaches, and when it's all done, it's traditional with pilots. Your instructor comes out, you have to wear a shirt you don't care about, cuts the back of your shirt out, and with a marker commemorates your solo day on your shirt. And then what a lot of pilots do is you frame it. So this is framed in our house here in Anthem to commemorate my first solo. So I was now a pilot for the first time in my life, when with the hand I was dealt at birth, being a pilot was never, ever gonna happen. So dream one, thanks to my transplant, comes true. Dream two, I always wanted to be an athlete. Well, I told you already I rode a 200-mile 1-day bike race. That was a milestone for me. And it was a little selfish in that I figured if I could ride 200 miles in 1 day in a bike race, that proves to me my lungs work. It's like I have to keep proving my lungs work. So that did. But then I thought, okay, that's a pretty big biking event. What other events are out there that most people consider a significant success? So I set my eyes on a full marathon. And I started training for my marathon, and this is the picture that was taken when I crossed the line with my first 26.2 marathon. And when I did that, I was about 17 years out of transplant, give or take. Never had a problem, so I'm a pilot now, I'm an athlete now, just incredibly grateful. And I went to school to have an aviation career, way back. So what really happened is a miracle did come along, and had I not gone to college, my logic way back then held water. I wouldn't have been prepared to follow, the career I really wanted to follow. But because I stuck it out, went to college, sick. It was hard to go to college when you just feel terrible all the time. I got to have a career in aviation. So went back to Boeing, healthy, did some engineering, but long story short, I ended up getting pulled over to the sales side. So I ended up getting to travel the whole world, something I could have never imagined as a little kid. Got to travel the whole world selling jets for Boeing, which was really fortunate because I got to get out retire right at 55, because for me, time is valuable. A lot of people would have kept working, but the second I could afford to get out, it's like, my future longevity is still in question, because when you're a lung transplant, you're never normal. Health, a transplant brings its whole set of complications, all for me, which have been well worth it. From the day I was transplanted, you're on anti-rejection drugs, which are highly toxic drugs. They're not good for the rest of your body, but it's the only way you don't reject your organ. So I have a lot of issues pop up from now 33 years being on anti-rejection drugs. My kidney function's a little off, my liver function's a little off, but they've been the same forever, and just really small price to pay. But I like to joke that now that I'm an old guy, right? I'm retired, I'm an old guy. When I have normal old guy stuff that's not related to cystic fibrosis or my lung transplant, I think it's awesome. It's like I have lived old enough to have knees that hurt, and I'm old enough to, have a back that's killing me. And I'm not joking, I mean, it's funny, but it's like I had the privilege of experiencing this. And just a year ago, kind of my driven attitude, I was having back pains that were not normal with guy back pains. And went to 3 different highly rated neurosurgeons all over the country, and all 3 said the same thing. You need a pretty big lumbar fusion in your lower back. And one surgeon said, with your health history, I'm not touching you. And the other surgeons, because it's a big surgery. And another top surgeon said, with your health history, I'm not nuts about doing this, and he was honest. He said, we need to make sure we're legally covered. You are going to be signing every paper in the world that you're aware that you're high risk with your medical history, but you're electing to do this. Third place I went, which was Cedars-Sinai in LA. And the surgeon and I clicked. And he looked at me and he goes, you don't need this, for any of you in the industry, L3 to S1 fusion to live day to day. We can do nerve blocks and make you comfortable. He goes, but you're not going to be out playing tennis. You're not going to be out playing pickleball. How important is that to you? We could have you live day to day in a decent level of comfort. But if you want to do all those things, you need to go through this risky surgery. And I didn't even have to think about it. I live life to live, and I want to hit tennis, and I want to play pickleball, so I'm like, do it. So even after going through this, I went through a spinal fusion a year ago. I'm not at risk for it, but you know, being through something like this that's this traumatic, it's not your get out of jail free card for the rest of your life. You know, about 5 years ago, out of the blue, I'm not at risk for it, but I had a pretty serious series of strokes out of the blue. And I was in the hospital and, you know, I was laying in the bed, didn't realize that stroke really hit me, but when I got up to walk the first time, I realized it. So I had to relearn, my balance still isn't perfect, but I can play pickleball and tennis. My vision's still a little not perfect, but I kind of had to relearn to walk right. So, but still, it's an old guy problem, and I'll take it, I'm still here. So, yeah. Lindy? Here, let me try this. Maybe this will work now. Oh, okay. So, the University of Washington, where I was transplanted, and actually Stanford, got research money to figure out, because transplants don't work very well. When I was transplanted, the average survival was only 2 years. And they were trying to, you know, test my immune system. They were doing all sorts of stuff, trying to figure out what is the secret to a lung transplant, because whatever that secret is, my case seems to hold that secret. And I am so grateful, by pure chance, that's me. And they narrowed it down to, they started having me talking to psychologists. And they actually think, in my case, that's where the secret lies. And I didn't have to read about this. This was just my natural personality. And I've been asked, and Lindy asked, do something, what are your kind of rules or philosophies for getting through the adversity you've gotten through? I'm a big believer in mind-body connection. Big believer. I also believe be an expert regarding whatever challenge in life you're going through. Be sure you're the expert. Be an active participant in your journey. The image I like is the cork floating down the street. Don't be that. Be active, be smart. Don't just go into a doctor's office, have them give you a bunch of mumbo jumbo that you don't understand, and just go do what they say. You know, be active, ask questions. Control what you can and accept what you can't. And I think that's important because life throws enough stress at you. You don't want to stress over things you cannot control. But if you can control it, do it, and do it diligently. Surround yourself with people and things you enjoy. I mean, the purpose of us being here is to be fulfilled and to be happy and fulfill other people and bring them happiness. And, you know, I'll get to it, but no pity parties. You know, you still have to live, even if you have a condition, even if you have a worry, even if you have whatever that you feel is lessening the quality of your life, you still have a responsibility to wake up every day and make that day as wonderful as it can be, you know, in spite of what's going on. And no pity parties, because it's easy to get stuck in pity parties. And what I always like to say is, you know, you're always at a party, or you might throw a party, and you've got to invite those 1 or 2 people you just don't want to stay very long. So I joke that if you're throwing a pity party, make pity the one you don't want to stay long. So if you're going to throw a pity party, pity is that guest that's got to go after a certain amount of time. I think people need a little time to feel sorry for themselves when they first hear news or something like that, but don't wallow in it, because it has a way to just linger. So, no pity, and practice gratitude. And I'm going to go through each one of these really briefly. So the mind-body connection, don't get lost in the adversity, because that could be a black hole. It just turns on itself. You sit around all day and you think about the problem. You think about the adversity. You think about all the bad what-ifs. What you want to do is visualize the good what-ifs. What do you want at the end of this adversity? With some people, that's action. I'm more that type, just what actions do I need to take? Some people, it's meditation, it can be spirituality, but don't stay stuck in that negative state of mind, because your body listens to your mind. So be you, don't be your challenge. I have met people who would be like, it's their identifying factor. Hi, I'm a transplant patient, or, hi, and if they tell you something like that, what their adversity is within the first minute of meeting them, that's their self-identity. What I say is everybody's going through some level of challenge. Be you. Be what your passions are, what sports you like, what entertainment you like, what type of music you like, what your goals are, what your dreams still are. That's how you identify. You are not your condition. I've met people who say people with cystic fibrosis are called CFers. And I've heard people go, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm a CFer. And I never understood that, because I introduce myself as Ken. I'm a pilot, or I'm an athlete, or, and I happen to have CF if it comes up. So you weren't your condition, you're you. You just happen to have that condition. Be as educated and smart as you can about your challenge. Don't put your trust fully in other people. Wear out Google. You should, in your one condition, I'm a believer, be as smart as your doctor, as smart as the smartest doctor, so you can ask the best questions. If you think every doctor knows every bit of research, they don't. So whatever you're going through, know what's the latest research. Know what hospitals are doing the latest procedures, or might be doing the latest clinical trials. That's why I don't have a house in LA, but I had my spine surgery done in LA, because I did research, and I was gonna put the odds in my favor by going to the best center. And seek out doctors, whether it's doctors, naturopathic practitioners, massage therapists, nutritionists, who you feel good about, because no one's gonna feel good about taking medical advice from someone who doesn't give them the time of day, who doesn't really interact with them. And if you ever, I'm not telling you what to do, it's a suggestion, ever go to a doctor who doesn't seem to take you seriously and downplays what you know compared to what they know, take this pill, just trust me, that is not a doctor I'll stay with. So participate in your own care. As I say, doctors know medicine, but you know you. And you know you better than any doctor knows you. So just become really smart in what you're going through, and pick practitioners that are going to talk to you about it and answer your questions, and even take your advice about, hey, I read about this at another center, as an example. Control what you can and accept what you can't. One benefit of this is it reduces stress. If you're going through a challenge, you're gonna be under enough stress anyway. Like when I was waiting for my lung transplant, when I had CF, and even right after my transplant when I was still nervous about it working, there were things I could control and things I could not. And I was not gonna panic over what I couldn't control. But what can I control? My diet, my level of exercise I could do. With a transplant, medication compliance is a big one. You need to take what medicines you need to take at the right time. Don't cut corners. Anything you can control to help you through your challenge, I did. Ate well, exercised, took all the medicines on time, made sure I took time to relax. And an example of what I could not control that a lot of transplant patients worry about, am I gonna reject? Because if you reject, you're probably gonna die. And you don't know if you're gonna reject. I wasn't worried about that because I could do nothing to directly control that. So that is something that many transplant patients worry all the time about rejection. I didn't, because you can't control it. Control your medication, your diet, your amount of sleep you get, how healthy you are, and so don't worry about what you can't control. And this is a big one. You want to be happy. Surround yourself with people and things you enjoy. Might be pickleball, might be cribbage, it might be movies, it might be sitting in the library over at the other center just reading a book, it might be going out for ice cream, whatever it is. But do things that you enjoy. And the second one I think is most important. I don't know why I put it second. I'm very black and white, but people either give you energy or they suck energy out of you. And don't spend any time with people who suck energy out of you. And if you have to, at least have boundaries. Because man, we all know those people who you love seeing them because they're gonna give you energy, right? Like you see them down the hallway and you get a smile on your face. And then we know the other people that you know they're gonna drag just the life out of them. It matters. You have the right in your one life to limit and choose who you hang out with. And boy, does laughter have power. It makes you feel good. They have proven laughter boosts feel-good endorphins. The same kind of endorphins you get, they call it the runner's high. It's the same endorphins you get from exercise. And laughter helps immunity and it reduces inflation. And inflammation. I wish it reduced inflation. And no pity parties. Again, like I mentioned, I pretty much talked about that before. Life hasn't singled you out, because I think a lot of people are going through something pretty traumatic. Like I felt my CF and getting listed for transplant, all that was true, but I kept pushing ahead because what I found when I got to know people, you thought no one else has any problems. And then you get to know someone and you hear their story. So you have not been singled out. Everybody you see is going through some challenge to them that is always on their mind. You walk through the grocery store, you walk down the street, everywhere you go, that place is full of people who are worried about something. So don't ever think that God or the universe is just punishing you for some unknown reason. Gratitude is a big one. I'll try not to cry a little bit on this one. But I tracked down my donor, and my donor I was transplanted when I was 30 years old, and my donor was a 16-year-old boy named Hunter. And they don't tell you that. I tracked that down and I figured it out. And I knew he lived, I don't know who's familiar with the Seattle area, but San Juan Islands are a very gorgeous set of islands up above Seattle. And I became a pilot so I could fly up there. And I found out he was from there and lived his whole life there. And I did not know if he was buried there or not. I knew nothing about it. But I heard he was going to be buried on the San Juan Islands somewhere, and it's multiple islands. Well, he grew up, and all his friends and his parents, everybody were on the biggest island called, it was San Juan Island. And so one time Wendy and Christopher came up years and years ago, and I used my newfound pilot's license, and I flew us from Renton, just outside of Seattle, had a beautiful plane ride up to the islands, and landed. And the plan for today was just have a great time on the island, but I just, as part of that day, wanted to see if he was buried there. That's where he was from. I didn't know he was buried there, but I just thought, what the heck, let's go out. We rented mopeds. This was a wonderful day. We had, fish and chips, and San Juan Islands are gorgeous. And we got on mopeds and had fun running them around the island. And we were at the moped rental place, and I said it was Susie's Mopeds, and I said to Susie, she's like, what landmarks do you want to see? There's whale watching over there, orca swim over there, and I said, do you have a cemetery on the island? And she's like, well, that's a unique request. She said, yeah, we have the old church is up on the hill, and she gave us a map how to get there. And Lenny and Christopher and I had fun. We rode our mopeds up there, and it was this idyllic white church up on a hill, surrounded by grave surrounded by the cemetery, and it was like out of a New England picture or something. I mean, it could not be more beautiful and idyllic. And Lindy and Christopher and I spread out to see if his grave was there. And I'm over in one area, Lindy's hunting in another area, Christopher's hunting in the other area. And all of a sudden, Christopher said, I found him. And I'm like, wow, you know, I'm gonna get to see my donor's grave. I didn't know what my reaction is. I mean, I wasn't anticipating any kind of reaction, but I wanted to see where my lungs came from, who saved my life. And I found him, and I looked down on the ground, and I was like, wow, you know, kind of an instant bonding. But July 7th, 1993, right? That's the big day for me. That's when I got my transplant, and my life really started. When I looked at his tombstone, and July 7th, 1993 was his date of death, I just broke down. Totally unexpected. Just started sobbing. Out of the blue, I never expected it. Lindy and Christopher backed off, and Christopher took this picture, which I just think is amazing. And it's this picture of me showing immense gratitude, standing over my donor's grave. So, by far the most powerful picture that will ever be taken of me. And I never felt more gratitude than I did then, but I feel it every day when I wake up. Because I woke up a lot of days afraid of death. I mean, death has been hanging over me since I was a kid, and to wake up not really afraid of death anymore, what a great way to start your day. But I think the key is you just be the smartest one in the room about your challenge, be motivated, never give up, and keep living. Do things you enjoy, and choose caretakers you trust and feel good about. And this just summarizes kind of my list of what I feel gets you through hell. That old quote I didn't explain, it said, when you're going through hell, keep going. That quote is often, it's a well-known quote, often attributed to Winston Churchill. It's a myth. It's not Winston Churchill, which is why on my slides I put not Winston Churchill, but no one knows where it came from. But this was really kind of my rules that I realized, and they were inborn. This is what got me through my journey through hell. And like I said, with my spinal fusion and strokes, you're always going through a journey. You just hope it's, you know, the depths aren't deep and the highs are high and long. And next one. So now you know why I had lungs on my slide.